What if I told you that North America was once filled with delicious, nutritious fruits that fed indigenous peoples for thousands of years, but have now been almost completely forgotten? Fruits so incredible that early colonists wrote home raving about them, comparing them to the finest European delicacies. Yet today, most people have never even heard of them. Today, I'm revealing 15 forgotten native fruits that indigenous foragers harvested for millennia. Fruits that are more nutritious, more sustainable, and often more delicious than anything in your grocery store. These aren't exotic tropical imports. These are fruits that grew wild across North America, fruits perfectly adapted to local climates, and fruits that could revolutionize how we think about food. Whether you're interested in foraging, permaculture, food security, or just discovering amazing new flavors, this video will open your eyes to an entire lost food system. Stick around because number 8 was called the finest native fruit of America by early naturalists, and tastes like tropical custard, yet almost nobody grows it today. But before we dive into these incredible forgotten fruits, if you're fascinated by native plants, foraging, or food history, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people interested in these topics. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our weekly videos. Alright, let's get into the video. Here's something most people don't realize. Before European colonization, North America had an incredibly rich tradition of fruit cultivation and foraging. Indigenous peoples didn't just randomly pick wild berries. They actively managed landscapes, encouraged productive fruit trees and shrubs, selectively bred varieties, and created food forests that sustained communities for thousands of years. When colonists arrived, they found forests and prairies filled with fruit-bearing trees and shrubs. Their journals and letters describe abundance that's hard to imagine today. Massive groves of nut trees, thickets of fruit-bearing shrubs, and trees so loaded with fruit that branches broke under the weight. So what happened? Why did these fruits disappear from our diet and consciousness? Several factors. European colonists preferred familiar fruits from home and imported apples, pears, and peaches. Native fruits were associated with indigenous peoples and therefore dismissed or devalued during colonization. Many native fruits don't ship or store as well as commercial fruits, making them unsuitable for industrial agriculture. As forests were cleared for agriculture, the trees and shrubs were destroyed, and over generations, knowledge of these fruits was lost as food systems became industrialized. The tragedy is that many of these native fruits are superior in nutrition, better adapted to local climates requiring no pesticides or irrigation, incredibly delicious with unique flavors, and ecologically beneficial supporting native wildlife. They represent a lost food heritage that's more relevant than ever as we face climate change and seek more sustainable food systems. The fruits I'm sharing today were staples for indigenous peoples across North America. These aren't obscure, barely edible wild foods. These are legitimate, delicious fruits that fed entire communities. Many are having a renaissance among foragers, permaculture enthusiasts, and people interested in bioregional eating. Let's jump into number 15 and work our way to the most incredible forgotten fruit that absolutely needs to make a comeback. Number 15. Beach plum, Prunus maritima. Starting at number 15, we have beach plum, a native fruit that was harvested extensively by indigenous peoples and early colonists along the Atlantic coast from Maine to Maryland. These small plums grow wild on coastal shrubs, thriving in sandy, salty conditions where few other fruit trees can survive. Beach plums are small, about the size of a cherry or small grape, but they're packed with flavor. They range from deep purple to red, with a sweet tart taste that's perfect for jams, jellies, sauces, and baking. The flavor has been described as a concentrated plum taste with hints of cherry. Indigenous peoples harvested beach plums in late summer and early fall, eating them fresh, drying them for winter storage, and using them to flavor pemmican. Early colonists quickly adopted them, and beach plum jam became a regional specialty that's still made in small quantities today. Beach plum shrubs are incredibly tough and resilient, tolerating salt spray, sandy soil, drought, and harsh coastal winds. They're perfect for seaside gardens and require no care once established. The shrubs grow 6 to 8 feet tall, produce beautiful white flowers in spring, and turn vibrant red-orange in fall. While you can still find wild beach plums along the coast, few people cultivate them, and they're almost unknown outside the Northeast. Some specialty nurseries are beginning to offer improved cultivars with larger fruit. Why they need to come back? Beach plums are perfectly adapted to coastal conditions, require zero maintenance, produce abundantly, and make incredible preserves. With sea levels rising and coastal agriculture facing challenges, these salt-tolerant fruits could be important for food security in coastal areas. Number 14. Serviceberry/Juneberry. Amelanchier species. At number 14 is serviceberry, also called Juneberry, shadbush, or Saskatoon berry. This fruit was harvested by indigenous peoples across North America from coast to coast, and was especially important in the northern plains and mountain regions. Serviceberries look like small blueberries, about pea-sized with a blue-purple color. They grow on small trees or large shrubs that produce stunning white flowers in early spring, often the first flowers of the season. The berries ripen in June, hence Juneberry. Typically when shadfish run upstream, hence shadbush. The flavor is sweet with hints of almond or marzipan, sometimes compared to blueberries, but with a nuttier taste. They're delicious fresh, dried, or cooked. Indigenous peoples dried serviceberries in large quantities for winter, often mixing them with dried meat and fat to make pemmican, a high-energy survival food. The Blackfoot and other plains tribes considered serviceberries one of their most important foods, harvesting them by the bushel. Lewis and Clark documented indigenous peoples harvesting vast quantities during their expedition. Serviceberry trees are incredibly ornamental with spring flowers, summer fruit, and brilliant fall color. They're hardy from zones 2 through 9, tolerate various soils, and have few pest problems. The fruit attracts birds, and many varieties produce heavily enough that there's plenty to share. Why they need to come back? Serviceberries are beautiful landscape trees that also produce food. They're native and support local ecosystems. They're incredibly cold-hardy and drought-tolerant, and they're one of the earliest fruits of the season. More people are discovering them, but they deserve to be as common as apple trees. Number 13. American persimmon, Diospyros virginiana. Coming in at number 13 is the American persimmon, a fruit that was so important to indigenous peoples that many place names reference it, and early colonists couldn't stop writing home about how delicious they were. Yet today, most Americans have never tasted one. American persimmons grow on medium to large trees native to the eastern United States. The fruits are smaller than Asian persimmons, typically 1 to 2 inches diameter, ranging from yellow-orange to reddish-purple when ripe. The key is ripeness. Unripe persimmons are incredibly astringent, making your mouth pucker, but ripe persimmons are like eating candy, with a sweet, honey-like flavor and custardy texture. Indigenous peoples harvested persimmons after the first frost when they're fully ripe and soft. They ate them fresh, dried them like dates, made them into breads and puddings, and even brewed a beer-like beverage from fermented persimmons. The fruit was so valuable that persimmon groves were protected and managed. Captain John Smith wrote in 1607, "If it be not ripe, it will draw a man's mouth awry with much torment, but when it is ripe, it is as delicious as an apricot." Thomas Jefferson grew persimmons at Monticello and praised them enthusiastically. American persimmon trees are incredibly low maintenance, thriving in zones 5 through 9 in a wide range of soils. They're drought-tolerant once established, have few pests, and can produce for 50-plus years. The trees also have beautiful glossy leaves and attractive bark. Why they need to come back? American persimmons are more cold-hardy and flavorful than Asian persimmons, require no care once established, are nutritionally dense with high vitamin C and fiber, and represent genuine American food heritage. The biggest challenge is that you need both male and female trees for fruit production, but improved grafted varieties are becoming available. Number 12. Thimbleberry, Rubus parviflorus. At number 12 is Thimbleberry, a native raspberry relative harvested extensively by indigenous peoples in the Pacific Northwest, Rocky Mountains, and Great Lakes regions. The fruit looks like a large, flattened raspberry that you can pop off the stem like a thimble, hence the name. Thimbleberries are soft, delicate, and incredibly flavorful with a sweet tart raspberry taste but brighter and more complex. They don't store or transport well, which is why you'll never see them in stores. They must be eaten fresh or preserved immediately. Indigenous peoples ate thimbleberries fresh by the handful, dried them on cedar planks, mixed them with salmon and other foods, and used the young shoots as a vegetable. Many coastal tribes considered thimbleberries one of their most important fruits. The plants grow as thornless shrubs 3 to 6 feet tall, a huge advantage over thorny raspberries and blackberries. They have large, maple-like leaves and white flowers. They spread slowly and aren't aggressive like some raspberries. Thimbleberries thrive in partial shade in their native range, zones 3 through 8, preferring cooler summers and moist conditions. They're perfect for shady woodland gardens where few other fruits grow well. Why they need to come back? Thimbleberries are thornless, shade-tolerant, produce delicious fruit, require no maintenance, and are native plants supporting local ecosystems. Anyone with a shady spot in the right climate should consider planting them. Number 11. Wild Plum, Prunus americana. Sliding into number 11 is the wild American plum, once so common across the eastern and central United States that it was a dietary staple for indigenous peoples. These plums grow on small trees or large shrubs, often forming dense thickets. Wild plums are small, about 1 inch in diameter, ranging from red to yellow when ripe, with a sweet tart flavor perfect for eating fresh or making into preserves. The taste is intense plum flavor, often more complex and interesting than domestic plums. Indigenous peoples harvested wild plums in late summer, eating them fresh, drying them for winter storage, and using them in pemmican and other preserved foods. The Omaha, Lakota, and other plains tribes managed plum thickets, protecting them from fire and encouraging their spread. Wild plum trees produce spectacular masses of white flowers in early spring, so abundant that thickets look like snowdrifts. The fall foliage is attractive red-orange. The trees are incredibly tough, tolerating drought, cold, to zone 3, heat, and poor soil. Settlers made wild plum jelly, preserves, and wine. Many homesteads had wild plum thickets nearby that provided reliable fruit with zero care. As agriculture industrialized, these thickets were cleared, and the tradition was lost. Why they need to come back? Wild plums are cold-hardy, drought-tolerant, beautiful ornamentals, and produce fruit with no care. They're perfect for permaculture plantings and wildlife habitat. Some nurseries now offer improved selections with larger fruit. Number 10. Highbush cranberry, Viburnum trilobum. At number 10 is Highbush cranberry, which isn't actually a cranberry at all. It's a viburnum, but the berries were used similarly by indigenous peoples across northern North America. The bright red berries hang in clusters and persist through winter. Highbush cranberry berries are tart and acidic, similar to cranberries but with their own distinct flavor. They're typically too tart to eat fresh but make excellent jelly, juice, sauce, and syrup. The berries are high in vitamin C and were important for preventing scurvy during long winters. Indigenous peoples harvested the berries after frost, which mellows the flavor slightly. They ate them fresh in small quantities, cooked them with meat and other foods, made them into a sauce similar to cranberry sauce, and used them medicinally. The Ojibwe called them anibimin and harvested them extensively. The shrubs are beautiful ornamentals growing 8 to 12 feet tall with white lace-cap flowers in spring, edible fruit in fall, and brilliant red fall foliage. They're hardy from zones 2 through 7, tolerating extreme cold and various soil conditions. Why they need to come back? Highbush cranberries are beautiful 4-season ornamentals, extremely cold-hardy, produce abundant fruit, require no maintenance, and provide food when other berries are long finished. They're perfect for northern gardens and were historically much more important than most people realize. Number 9. Hackberry, Celtis occidentalis. Coming in at number 9 is hackberry, a tree that was incredibly important to Plains Indians but is almost completely forgotten as a food source today. The small berry-like drupes were harvested in huge quantities and were a calorie-dense survival food. Hackberries are small, about pea-sized, with a thin, sweet flesh surrounding a large seed. You eat them whole, seed and all, which has a uniquely sweet, nutty flavor. They're dry rather than juicy, more like a sweet nut than a typical berry. The high seed-to-flesh ratio means they're incredibly calorie-dense. Plains tribes pounded entire hackberries, flesh and seed together, into a powder that was mixed with fat and meat to make pemmican. This preparation could last for years and provided complete nutrition. Hackberries were so important that indigenous peoples would travel to specific groves to harvest them. Lewis and Clark documented Plains Indians storing large quantities of hackberry pemmican. The Comanche, Pawnee, and other tribes used hackberries as a staple food, especially during winter when other foods were scarce. Hackberry trees are incredibly tough, tolerating drought, heat, cold, zones 2 through 9, alkaline soil, and urban pollution. They're often used as street trees. The trees grow 40 to 60 feet tall and live for decades with no care whatsoever. Why they need to come back? While hackberries may never become a mainstream fruit, they represent an important food that sustained peoples through harsh winters. They're still edible today, and the trees provide valuable wildlife food. Recognizing hackberries as historical food plants helps us understand indigenous food systems. Number 8. Pawpaw, Asimina triloba. Here we are at number 8. The pawpaw, possibly the most delicious native North American fruit and the one that absolutely needs the biggest comeback. Pawpaw was called the finest native fruit in America by early naturalists, yet today most Americans have never tasted one. Pawpaws are the largest edible fruit native to North America, growing to the size of a mango on small understory trees in the eastern United States. The fruit has a creamy, custard-like texture and a tropical flavor combining banana, mango, melon, and vanilla. People who taste pawpaws for the first time are shocked that something so tropical tasting grows as far north as Canada. Indigenous peoples harvested pawpaws extensively in late summer and early fall. The fruit was eaten fresh, and while it doesn't store well, it would have been gorged upon during the short season. Many indigenous groups had specific pawpaw groves they returned to annually. When colonists arrived, they found pawpaws growing abundantly and adopted them enthusiastically. Thomas Jefferson grew pawpaws at Monticello. George Washington loved chilled pawpaw for dessert. Lewis and Clark survived on pawpaws when other food ran out during their expedition. Pawpaws were sold in markets in cities like Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. through the 1800s. So why did they disappear? Pawpaws have a very short shelf life, just 3 to 5 days after ripening. They don't transport well, becoming mushy and bruised. This made them incompatible with industrial agriculture and grocery store distribution. As food systems centralized, pawpaws were left behind. Pawpaw trees grow as understory trees in eastern forests from Florida to Ontario, zones 5 through 9. They're beautiful landscape trees with large, tropical-looking leaves, interesting maroon flowers, and brilliant yellow fall color. They have no serious pests or diseases. Why they need to come back? Pawpaws are incredibly delicious and nutritious, native and adapted to eastern climates, require no pesticides or care, and represent a legitimate American fruit heritage. There's currently a pawpaw renaissance happening, with specialty nurseries offering improved varieties with larger fruit. If you live in pawpaw territory, you should absolutely plant them. Number 7. Maypop/passionfruit, Passiflora incarnata. At number 7 is Maypop, the native North American passion fruit that produces fruit similar to tropical passion fruits but growing as far north as Pennsylvania. This vigorous vine was harvested by indigenous peoples throughout the southeastern United States. Maypops produce round fruits about the size of a chicken egg that turn from green to yellow-orange when ripe. The interior contains aromatic pulp and seeds with a sweet tart, tropical flavor similar to commercial passion fruits. The name Maypop comes from the popping sound the fruits make when stepped on. Indigenous peoples ate Maypops fresh, scooping out the pulp and seeds. They also used the plant medicinally. Modern research has confirmed that passion flower has genuine sedative and anti-anxiety properties. The Cherokee, Choctaw, and other southeastern tribes cultivated Maypops around villages. The vines produce incredibly exotic, intricate purple and white flowers that look like they belong in the tropics. They spread through underground runners, covering fences, trellises, and arbors. The vines die back to the ground in winter but re-emerge vigorously in spring. Maypops are hardy in zones 5 through 9, much more cold-tolerant than tropical passion fruits. They grow best in full sun and well-drained soil but tolerate various conditions. Why they need to come back? Maypops produce tropical-tasting fruit in temperate climates, have spectacular flowers, require minimal care, and are native plants. Anyone wanting to grow passion fruit outside the tropics should try Maypops. Number 6. Black walnut, Juglans nigra. Coming in at number 6 is black walnut. Yes, it's primarily a nut tree, but I'm including it because the nuts were such a critical food source for indigenous peoples across the eastern United States, and they deserve recognition in any discussion of native foods. Black walnuts have incredibly rich, intense flavor, much stronger and more complex than English walnuts. They're oily, slightly bitter, and absolutely delicious in baking and cooking. The challenge is that they're labor-intensive to harvest and crack, with thick, hard shells. Indigenous peoples harvested black walnuts in huge quantities each fall, storing them for winter protein and fat. The Iroquois, Shawnee, Cherokee, and others had specific black walnut groves they managed and protected. The nuts were eaten whole, pounded into meal for bread, and pressed for oil. Black walnuts were so important that many indigenous groups considered the trees sacred. Colonists quickly adopted black walnuts, and they became valuable timber trees. Ironically, many ancient black walnut groves were cut down for their valuable wood. Black walnut trees are massive, majestic specimens growing 50 to 75 feet tall in zones 4 through 9. They're valuable for both food and timber. The trees produce compounds that inhibit some other plants, allelopathy, so planting beneath them requires care. Why they need to come back? While black walnuts are still harvested, most people have never tasted them because they're not commercially viable due to difficult processing. Backyard foragers and gardeners should appreciate these incredible nut trees that provided essential nutrition to indigenous peoples. Number 5. Chokeberry, Aronia species. At number 5 is chokeberry, which gets its unfortunately off-putting name from its astringent taste when eaten fresh. But when cooked or processed, it transforms into an incredibly nutritious and delicious fruit. Indigenous peoples across the northern United States and Canada harvested chokeberries extensively. Chokeberries are small, dark purple to black berries growing in clusters on shrubs. They're too astringent to eat fresh in quantity. They make your mouth pucker, hence chokeberry. But they make excellent jelly, syrup, juice, and sauce. They're also incredibly high in antioxidants, higher than blueberries or cranberries. Indigenous peoples harvested chokeberries after frost, which mellows the astringency. They cooked them with meat, dried them for winter, and mixed them into pemmican. The berries provided important vitamins during winter when fresh foods were scarce. Chokeberry shrubs are beautiful ornamentals growing 6 to 8 feet tall with white flowers in spring, glossy leaves in summer, and brilliant red fall color. They're hardy from zones 3 through 8, tolerating cold, heat, wet soil, poor soil, and neglect. They have no serious pests. Why they need to come back? Chokeberries are incredibly nutritious superfruits, require zero maintenance, are beautiful ornamentals, and are native plants. They're having a revival in Europe as a health food, but are still largely forgotten in North America. They deserve a place in every northern garden. Number 4. Wild grapes, Vitas species. At number 4 are wild grapes. Several native species including fox grape, riverbank grape, and frost grape that were harvested by indigenous peoples throughout North America. These grapes have much more intense flavor than cultivated grapes, with complex wild tastes. Native wild grapes tend to be smaller than cultivated grapes with thicker skins and more seeds, but the flavor is incredible, sweet, tart, and complex with winey notes. Different species have different characteristics. Fox grapes, Vitis labrusca, are the ancestors of Concord grapes and have that characteristic foxy flavor. Indigenous peoples ate wild grapes fresh by the basketful during late summer and fall. They dried them into raisins for winter storage. They used them to flavor other foods. Some groups made a beverage from fermented grape juice. The young leaves were eaten as greens. When colonists arrived, they found grapevines growing in trees reaching immense size, trunks as thick as a man's thigh climbing 50 to 60 feet into the canopy. These wild grapes were so abundant that the Vikings called North America Vinland. Wild grapes grow throughout North America in various habitats, particularly along streams and forest edges. They're incredibly vigorous vines that can cover large areas. Several cultivated grape varieties have been developed from native species, including Concord, Niagara, and Catawba. Why they need to come back? While some native grapes are still grown, most people only know European wine grapes. Native grapes are more cold-hardy, disease-resistant, and adapted to local conditions. They're perfect for arbors, and their intense flavor is perfect for juice, jelly, and wine. Number 3. Salal berry, Gaultheria chalon. Here we are at number 3. Salal berry, an incredibly important fruit for indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest that's almost completely unknown outside that region. Salal berries were harvested in enormous quantities and were a dietary staple. Salal berries are small, dark purple to blackberries growing on evergreen shrubs. They have a unique flavor that's sweet, slightly earthy, and complex, sometimes described as tasting like blueberries with hints of wintergreen or spice. The texture is mealy rather than juicy. Coastal tribes from Alaska to California harvested salal berries by the thousands of pounds. They ate them fresh, dried them into cakes that could be stored for years, mixed them with salmon oil, and traded them with inland tribes. The berries were so important that Salal picking rights were inherited property among some tribes. Salal shrubs grow as dense, evergreen understory plants 1 to 6 feet tall in coastal forests. They have beautiful glossy leaves, white to pink bell-shaped flowers, and produce prolifically. They're shade-tolerant and thrive in the acidic soil under conifers. The foliage is commercially harvested today for the floral industry. Salal leaves are shipped worldwide for use in flower arrangements. Ironically, the berries are virtually ignored. Why they need to come back? Salal berries are nutritious, productive, shade-tolerant, evergreen, and represent important Pacific Northwest food heritage. Anyone in the Pacific Northwest should consider growing them, and they deserve wider recognition as a native superfood. Number 2. American hazelnut, Corylus americana. We've reached number 2. American hazelnut, an incredibly important nut that indigenous peoples harvested from coast to coast. These native hazelnuts are smaller than commercial European hazelnuts but have equal or superior flavor. American hazelnuts grow on shrubs 8 to 15 feet tall, forming dense thickets. The nuts are smaller than commercial hazelnuts but have rich, sweet flavor perfect for eating fresh or using in cooking. Indigenous peoples harvested hazelnuts in late summer and fall, storing them in quantity for winter. The nuts were eaten whole, roasted, pounded into meal for bread and cakes, pressed for oil, and traded extensively. Many tribes managed hazelnut thickets by burning underbrush, which encouraged the shrubs to produce more vigorously. Archaeological evidence shows hazelnut shells at indigenous sites dating back thousands of years. American hazelnuts are more cold-hardy than European hazelnuts, tolerating temperatures to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, zones 4 through 9. They grow in sun to partial shade in various soils. The shrubs produce catkins in early spring and have beautiful yellow fall color. Why they need to come back? American hazelnuts are cold-hardy, disease-resistant, beautiful shrubs that also produce food. They're perfect for hedges and edible landscapes. While some specialty nurseries offer them, they deserve much wider cultivation. Research is ongoing to develop improved varieties with larger nuts, combining American hardiness with European size. Number 1. Huckleberry, Vaccinium species. And finally, taking the number 1 spot as the most important forgotten fruit that needs to come back is huckleberry. Several species of huckleberries were harvested by indigenous peoples throughout North America, but they're especially important in the Pacific Northwest and Rocky Mountains, where they were a dietary staple. Huckleberries look similar to blueberries, but have a more intense, complex flavor, sweeter, tartar, and with wild, winey notes. They grow on shrubs in mountain forests, often at high elevations. The flavor varies by species and location, but all are considered superior to cultivated blueberries by those who know them. For many Western tribes, huckleberries were the most important fruit of the year. Entire communities would travel to traditional huckleberry grounds for weeks-long harvesting expeditions. The berries were eaten fresh, dried for winter, mixed with dried meat and fat, and traded. The Nez Perce, Salish, and other northwestern tribes considered huckleberries sacred. The berries were so important that many tribes have traditional first berry ceremonies where the first huckleberries of the season are blessed before the harvest begins. Picking rights to specific huckleberry patches were inherited property passed down through generations. Today, wild huckleberries are still harvested by foragers and sold at farmers markets for premium prices, often $30 to $40 per pound. But huckleberries resist cultivation. Unlike blueberries, which have been domesticated and are easy to grow, huckleberries don't transplant well and have specific soil requirements. They remain truly wild fruits. Why they need to come back? Huckleberries represent the ultimate connection between people and place. Truly wild food that can't be industrialized or commodified. While we may never cultivate huckleberries on a large scale, we need to protect wild huckleberry habitat, respect indigenous knowledge and picking rights, and recognize huckleberries as culturally and ecologically important native fruits. Anyone who forages for huckleberries should do so sustainably and respectfully, remembering that these berries have sustained peoples for thousands of years. And there you have it, 15 forgotten native fruits that indigenous foragers harvested for millennia and that absolutely need to come back into our awareness and diets. From the incredible pawpaw to sacred huckleberries, from nutritious chokeberries to delicious wild plums, these fruits represent a lost food heritage that's more relevant than ever. These fruits aren't just historical curiosities. They're delicious, nutritious, sustainable foods perfectly adapted to North American climates. Many of them are more nutritious than commercial fruits, require no pesticides or care, and support native ecosystems and wildlife. As we face climate change and seek more sustainable food systems, these native fruits offer solutions. They're drought-tolerant, cold-hardy, disease-resistant, and regenerative. Growing and eating them connects us to place and to the indigenous peoples who stewarded these foods for thousands of years. I encourage you to learn about native fruits in your region, plant them if appropriate, forage for them respectfully and sustainably, support nurseries that sell native fruits, and honor indigenous food knowledge and traditions. These fruits are part of American heritage that deserves to be remembered and celebrated. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found this video fascinating and want to learn more about native plants and foraging, please give it a big thumbs up and share it with others interested in these topics. And make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our videos. Drop a comment below. Have you tasted any of these native fruits? Are any of them common in your region? Do you forage for or grow native fruits? Share your experiences with our community. Thanks again for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Happy foraging and happy growing.